Well, thank you all for being with us this evening. As you can see, this is being filmed by Northborough Cable Access Television. So if there were folks in your community that weren't able to attend because of the time, the weather was a bit chilling out there, but it's not snow, so we're happy to see the rain. And you might want to share with them that this is available for viewing. We'll also have this available on our district website as well. And I'm going to make reference to a number of documents in the presentation this evening. Those are also available for your review and reading from a download on the website. So again, thank you all for being here. This is certainly something that there's been a lot of conversation about, not only on the national and local level, but here in our schools. And so this evening, we'd like to provide you with an overview of our safe school readiness protocols and planning. And before I begin, I would like to introduce a number of people that are here with us this evening. All of the participants have been a very vital part of our collaboration and readiness planning for probably 5 to 6 years now. And so I'd like to introduce our panel. And it is an honorable panel who serves our community well, certainly. And we have representation from both communities. Like, you moved your seats around. Did you move your seats around? Okay, good thing we know who you are. So the chief of our fire department here in Northborough, Chief Parenti. Next to Chief Parenti is Chief Bill Iver, Northborough Police Department. Our school resource officer, Michael Bissett, former graduate of Algonquin Regional High School. Next to Michael is the fire chief from Southborough, Joseph Morrow. Next to Chief Morrow is Chief of Police Ken Paulus, followed by our school resource officer in Southborough, Kevin Landry, and rounding out the panel is our assistant superintendent, Greg Martino. So again, thank you for being with us. We're going to start with a little bit of an overview, how we derived and arrived at the plans and the discussions that we're going to share with you this evening. And I want to travel back through history a little bit to reassure you that the plans that we have in place are well embedded in practice, not just educational practice, but Homeland Security, the state police, the local police, to name a few of our resources that we've utilized to arrive at some of the information we're going to share with you this evening. We have a number of administrators with us this evening, and I think it's important that we take special note in how our plans were developed. Our administrative team, an integral, essential, critical component of all of the conversations that have taken place over these years, and certainly we're really proud of the leadership that we have in each of our schools, because everyone in our schools have been a part of the training and the development of our readiness protocols, an essential part and really the true meaning of collaboration and making connections. So I'm going to introduce them, and if you would, I know it's been a long day, but if you would stand and just acknowledge our visitors this evening, that would be great. Clayton Ryan is the principal at Finn School in Southborough. It is a pre-K 1-2 school. And I particularly emphasize the grade levels that are represented because our readiness plans incorporate the importance of customization at each level and at each grade span. Michelle Tantadonato, assistant principal here at Algonquin Regional High School. Kathleen Valente, principal of the Neary School, it's grade 3-4-5 school. In Southborough, Michelle Carb, principal, Malacan Middle School here in Northborough. Jen Callahan, assistant principal, Malacan Middle in Northborough. Sarah Pogloski Walsh, principal of Algonquin Regional High School. Alana Sear, principal of Proctor School here in Northborough. Our elementary schools in Northborough, K-5s. Followed by Lori Pardee, who is our district nurse leader, an integral part and a component in our behavioral and emotional components of our safety readiness plan. Sue Witten, a round of applause for Sue Witten. After 20 years as principal at Z School, she is retiring. And she's here this evening, committed to our readiness plan. That is phenomenal. Marie Allen, who is our Director of Student Sports Services, again, a critical component of our safety plans, and she is the District Director of Student Sports Services. Keith Lavoie, principal of the Trotter Middle School in Southborough, and there's a smattering of folks here and there that I'm trying to make note of. An essential part of our readiness planning is also our facilities and maintenance team, and Tom Maidler came out tonight to be part of this. He is our facilities director in Northborough. And in the back is Deb Lemieux, who is our assistant director of student support services. Deb, if you would wave. We have a number of school committee members here this evening. They are also a very critical part of our readiness planning, and I looking and scanning very quickly. John Kane is school committee, Algonquin Regional, Northborough Southborough Regional, and also the K-8 system. Patty Kress is a K-8 school committee member. Lynn Winter, longstanding member of the Algonquin Northborough Southborough School Committee. Paul Desmond, he's a twofer. He's on K-8 Southborough, and he's also on Region. So we're happy to have our school committee members with us as well. So as I mentioned, and as the communication that was sent out to all of our families in the community, this is about, and always continues to be about, making the connection. That's a vital component of our safety readiness plans. And this evening, we're represented by our community service and safety chiefs, and they will talk more specifically perhaps about the community safety, and we're here to talk about our safe schools. As part of our strategic planning, we're working on Vision 2020. It's soon to be re-energized and revitalized, given that we're so close to 2020. Our mission statement that was developed in collaboration with community members and all of the stakeholders in our communities is very much focused on a safe environment. And as you can see, the mission of the public schools of Northborough and Southborough is to provide an exceptional educational experience for every student in a safe environment. In order to bring some life to the word safe environment, we sought out the best research, and we wanted to make sure that the language that we included in our readiness plan and the practices and the drills that our students are involved in every day were actually already well vetted by experts in the field. In 2012, and I'm going to quickly go through history, this is a history that we do want to repeat because it's been a very successful process for us, but it also gives credibility to the work that we have in front of us and the work that we do each and every day. This district invited in Homeland Security, and this goes all the way back to 2012, and we were very much excited to offer this Readiness and Emergency Management Threat Assessment presentation. It was a 2-day workshop to every law enforcement agency across the Commonwealth and every school district across the Commonwealth. There began our developmental work around threat assessments in our schools, and also being watchful and mindful of concerns that we might see in our student population. We began an enhanced review of our current lockdown and/or safety protocols by developing our own safe school readiness assessment. We have 10 schools in our school district, and we wanted to know where were we so that we would benchmark our performance against where our existing practices were. In 2013 also, 1 month prior to that, we began to use the research and the findings that we experienced in the Readiness Emergency Management training and started to explore the notion of changing our lockdown, and that was the only way we referred to our safety drills at that time, lockdown procedures, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like here and how that evolved. In 2014, we as a school district were invited to testify before the House Speaker DeLeo's Gun Control Task Force, and what we testified about was the importance of collaboration as a community, as schools, working very closely with our safety officials. So because of that testimony, when Governor Patrick released his task force document, we actually were able to find within that much of what we shared with the task force about the work that we do here in our community. So we were sort of celebrated for the work that we've done and that we continue to do when that document was released. We also held 5 years ago now, almost 5.5, here on a night like this, even though it was in September, it was a little brisk, but still raining, I believe, a Safe School Readiness Forum. And that was in collaboration with the STARS, which is the School Threat Assessment and Response System that NEMLIC, which is the New England, Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council, helped us develop. And through that development process 5 years ago, the folks that you see around the table this evening were with us every step of the way for almost a year to develop our protocols. In addition to that, we spent about a year training our staff so that realizing if they were comfortable, our students would be as well as we progress through these safety protocols. We were the first district to invite in district attorney early and engage in the opioid substance abuse prevention program, because a true safety plan is not just about what we read about in the news, active shooters, intruders. It's really about everything that encompasses keeping our students safe. So we work very closely with the emergency management teams in our communities, but it's also about keeping students safe from a behavioral well-being standpoint, the whole child's safety. And those are our concerns as well, and that's embedded in our practice and our plan. We also developed model medical emergency response planning, otherwise known as MERP. If you visit our schools, you will see the MERPs hanging probably next to the defibrillators that we have in all of our schools. And that, again, is to keep our students safe, even when we're not in session. Provides notification for anyone who's visiting our schools in the off hours as to what they should do and who they should call. We also participated in a multi-hazard planning session. It was a 4-day workshop in our schools to address all the other safety threats. We've just gone through a horrific winter season, and we all know there were a lot of safety concerns that really were not about the schools, but were about when our schools could reopen and how could our schools reopen safely. And I want to thank the team around the table. We've spent a lot of time chatting in the early hours about all of those safety concerns when it comes to inviting our students back into schools. And then we did participate, again, voluntarily in a grant that provided us with the knowledge and the opportunity to do the water testing that was conducted in all of our schools. So I want to just point out that all of these things were, for the most part, voluntary actions on the school's part to make sure that whatever we present to you this evening is well vetted in research and supported by agencies beyond just the Department of Ed and so forth. A key statement and a critical piece of our safety plan, the foundation, is this statement that Governor Deval Patrick embedded into that document that I referred to. It is, I'm going to present a visual for you because this is really a guiding document for parents and for schools, and you can download this from our website. This is the one I made reference to earlier, that some of that collaborative spirit and the importance of that is found in the plan. And it's school safety and security, and this really encapsulates our philosophy. No child will be able to succeed academically if they don't first feel safe in school. No teacher will be able to teach at their best if they aren't confident there's a plan in place to ensure their school is well prepared for an emergency. This is a model that we've created. Our strategic plan includes 4 focus areas. We have 4 building blocks that we use as guiding principles as we develop our safe school planning and as we engage in weekly, monthly, and yearly conversations about safe schools. Key components of the plan: prevention, very much proactive strategies, active dialogue, lots of collaboration, research. Moving to preparedness, appropriate response, which also includes communication to the community, and then a reviewing of the plan and how do we move forward if there has been an incident. The 4 cornerstones of our guiding principles of our plan: collaboration, community and family engagement, programmatic and behavioral supports, certainly a review of technology and infrastructure, and training and planning. Through the research, we have found one thing: collaboration is key, and that no building block is key unto itself. It's a combination, and it's a supportive network of experiences and planning that brings about a successful plan. So that's how we came to tonight. And I'm going to turn this over to Clayton Ryan and Michelle Tantodonato, who will speak more specifically about what takes place in our schools and a little bit more about our safety drill procedures. I will also add that both Clayton and Michelle throughout this process attended a week-long training for ALICE and are well-versed in all of the techniques and attributes and characteristics of the ALICE program. You participated this in the hot month of July, and I think it was an experience that you went through, but certainly valuable to the district. So I'm happy to turn this over to them. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome. I'm going to try to focus on the mic and the PowerPoint without ignoring you, so please bear with me. So as Superintendent Johnson said, you know, we have come a long way. The rationale is pretty evident. Anyone who has taken elementary Latin in loco parentis, you know, your parents give their children over to the school. Our task is not just to teach, to provide them with knowledge, the learning of academics. It's to keep them safe. That's our charge as school administrators, as school staff. So really, that's the key to our, okay. That's the, am I at the, no, I'm not. Okay. Really, that's the key to what we do and why we're doing it. In addition to that, we have followed the research. I'm going to get to it in a bit about the hierarchy of need. If students don't feel safe, as Superintendent Johnson just said, they're not going to be available to learn. They need to have their basic needs met in order to be cognitively and emotionally available. We have researched and vetted a lot of school safety programs out there when we adopted the ALICE program. If you go on YouTube and type in safest school in America, you'll see an example of a school that is considered hardened. Investment in infrastructure, you know, bulletproof glasses, gas that's released from the ceiling, locked barriers, things like that. That's one way to keep kids safe. Our approach is taking a balanced approach, making sure that connections exist between staff and students, and that our kids feel safe coming into our school when they're there. We pride ourselves on having a positive school climate. I'm going to get to the climate-specific things in a minute. And that we have adopted model programs for safety within our schools, not just our active threat-specific programs. So what really makes any school safe? It starts with the practices and the values that establish a positive school climate. And at the beginning of the year, at my building and at the Woodward building, we talked about connections. We talked about how important it is for our staff to connect with kids. So our philosophy is really that connections equate to culture, which represents climate. So if you have those connections with staff and students, you will be doing things on a regular basis within your school that equate to a positive climate. And we pride ourselves in the fact that when you walk into any of our schools, there's that vibe, that positive energy that you feel. Kids are smiling, they're walking down the hallway, skipping, running on occasion, even though they shouldn't. That is the climate of a safe, happy learning environment. We also pride ourselves on the fact that there's a strong student-staff relationship. Our staff members take time to know their kids, know their classroom. And when something's askew, they come in and things are atypical, we respond to that. We have a solid connection of systems in place that can respond to our kids' needs. Whole needs, not just their academic, social, emotional, their well-being. We have high and clear behavioral and academic expectations of our students. If you didn't have that high bar, our kids wouldn't be challenged. If they're not challenged, they check out. The statistics on middle school and high school kids being disenfranchised, not connected to schools across the nation are staggering. 40% of kids entering high school today have some lack of connection that has evolved from their early years up through high school. We want to reverse that trend. We want to make sure that there are solid staff connections with our kids. We also pride ourselves on the fact that we have high levels of parent and community involvement. Our schools are open. Our schools are active. We have meetings, brownie meetings at the Finn School, Boy Scout meetings, after-school programs, community events on the weekends. We want our schools to be active hubs in the community. Our parents are involved, volunteering, doing math centers, taking part in the classroom. That's a sign that help kids feel safe. And we also have very strong partnerships with safety and emergency management entities within the town and across the state. So getting back to a student's sense of safety, Abraham Maslow created the hierarchy of need, and I think it really speaks to what needs to happen in order for kids to get to that top part where they are self-actualized and they're available to learn. It starts with the basics: food, shelter, clothing. Then from that point on, it's safety. Do they feel safe, emotionally and physically safe within all their environments? If they don't, they're not available to learn. So some existing school measures that we've put in place. Superintendent Johnson spoke to a few. Others, we pride ourselves on our buildings and our grounds being well maintained. We have very specific access points in all of the buildings. We have lanyards and key cards that allow us to come in and out of the buildings. All of our visitors are monitored and checked. We ask people what the purpose of their visits are. We make sure they sign in and that they're going to their destination. In addition to that, our kids are, at the elementary level, are taught to identify an unauthorized visitor or an active intruder by not having a lanyard. Someone who doesn't have a tag, who isn't authorized to be in the building. If they suspect that someone shouldn't be there, they bring it to their teacher's attention. And we want them to have an active voice in that, because it's not just staff that are making our schools safe, it's the students as well. Our students also, our staff are also part of student assistant teams at the district level. We meet regularly within the buildings and across the districts to talk about themes, to talk about issues that are happening with our students and that are happening within the community. In addition to that, across the district, our students feel safe reporting concerning behavior and safety problems that happen within all of our schools. We want kids to feel like if they see something, they can say something, and we're going to do something about it. And as I mentioned before, we have a strong collaborative relationship with our police. With our police and fire, we take pride in the trainings and the practices that we do on a regular basis. We have countless fire drills, safety drills. We talk about medical and emergency response procedures within the building and within the community. So now I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who's going to talk a little bit about our ALICE program. And our ALICE program is the active threat or threat-specific response program that we've implemented within all of our schools.
Good evening. So when we started this, ALICE is really based on a lot of research that was done, and there were a lot of actual cases that were studied, including the ones listed starting with Columbine. The United Airlines Flight 93 from 2001, the Amish Schoolhouse, Virginia Tech, We have Sandy Hook, we have the Las Vegas concert venue. So a lot of research went into ALICE to come up with the protocols that they felt best met or helped in these situations. This ALICE is also nationally and locally endorsed and sponsored. Department of Homeland Security, International Association of Chiefs of Police, and both the Northborough and Southborough Police Departments endorse and sponsor the ALICE program. So I wanted to give you a brief overview of what ALICE is. So we go through each of the letters. A stands for alert. It can be anything that alerts you to a possible threat-specific situation. We learn to use plain language. There are no codes here. So an example might be implement the ALICE protocol immediately. There's an intruder in the main lobby of the school and is headed down towards the gym. He has on a black jacket and blue baseball cap. Again, implement the ALICE protocol immediately. And we know to make sure that we tell, if we're getting on this and saying this, that they are going to implement ALICE. That is they will hear that line. Information is a very key part of this program, and it should flow in all directions, and we can use all available means to communicate that alert. Administration has walkies on them. We use a PA system. A lot of our faculty and population in the entire school, especially high school, has cell phones. We can use any means we need to communicate that alert. L stands for lockdown. So one of the first decisions based on the information given is, do we secure the room or do we evacuate? If they decide to secure the room, the doors, which are all locked at all times, they make sure that that's shut. It's a semi-secure starting point. Enhanced lockdown or barricade using any means, so they may drag tables over, they may put chairs against the door. That's what it means when we talk about lockdown. I is for inform. Information here is key in this entire protocol. You use any means necessary to share real-time information. It should be given again in plain language. We're talking who, what, where, when, how. If you have answers to those questions, you try to pass that along. And it should be used to make the best decision to maximize and maintain safety. So at the high school level, faculty and staff and students, they know when we go through this that they're using that information to make the best possible decision at that time. C stands for counter. This is one of the last resorts. This is rarely used, if at all. It's only to be used when confronted by the intruder. So this is the use of simple, proactive techniques to confront an active intruder. Anything can be used as a weapon. We teach them to create as much noise as possible, to throw things at the intruder's head to disrupt their concentration and aim, and even an attack in a group or swarm. Again, this is only when confronted with an active intruder. The best possible scenario and choice, hopefully, that most people make is E, which stands for evacuate, which is to remove yourself from the danger zone as quickly as possible. Decide if you can safely evacuate based on the information you're given. If the intruder is inside, you try to get outside. Run in a zigzag pattern as fast as you can. Do not stop running until you are far away from the source of the threat. And police in the district have determined rallying and reunification points. Although there's 5 steps in this, some key points to remember. You don't follow that order. You do not have to follow that order. So it's not a set of sequence of action steps, as in first you lock down and then you evacuate. The ALICE protocol, you determine, again, based on that information, which of the letters you're going to try and use. Also, the ALICE protocol is about empowering the individual to make the best decision for safety and security at any given moment. An individual may use only one part of the program or may decide to use all 5 parts. We also teach that this is a life skill. So when we go through the training with the students each year, as far as high school, we remind them, if they're in the mall, to know their exit points. If they're in a movie theater, to know their exit points and get that information too. So ALICE can be used anywhere, and it's all part of information and knowing where you are.
So good evening. I'm Greg Martino, and I have the privilege of serving as the district's assistant superintendent. And I also have the privilege of facilitating tonight's question and answer. As Superintendent Johnson started the presentation with the title, Making the Connection, Safe School, Safe Community, it's essential that we hear from our community. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, provide comments to our panelists, and for our panelists to listen and answer questions. And tonight we have an Algonquin student who will help facilitate the microphone. So who is the brave person who will ask the first question?
Of special ed children and how you plan for children with mobility difficulties, hearing difficulties, behavioural difficulties and stuff like that. So I just wondered it would be just nice and reassuring for parents of children with special needs to know kind of what the plans are for that population.
So I'm going to start, Ruth, with the response, but I see Michael Bissett nodding as our school resource officer. Just so you know, our school resource officers are really resources for other than incident-specific day-to-day occurrences. We are always happy to see our school resources about the campus, and on a weekly basis, Officer Bissett does make the rounds to all of our schools. He is a familiar face to our student population, and it's always wonderful as we travel about the schools to see the students really engaging him in conversation. I think I mentioned in the one of my communications home to the parents that when we see a police cruiser at our schools, it very rarely means that there's an incident there that they are purposely investigating, but rather that they're making connections with our students, so our students are feeling that they are accessible to them and very safe. So specifically to your question, Ruth, we do and we have performed specific trainings and drills with our students in our specified programs. And just recently, I think it was Officer Cesny, who was in one of our schools, I think the Proctor School, Alana, doing specific drills in those classrooms. So it is first and foremost a concern of ours, and we are aware that individual students need individual assistance from time to time, given their circumstances. We also accessed a student-specific protocol that we're going through, student by student, who we've identified may need special supports. And it's a very detailed document, which we were actually able to access through REMS, the Readiness Emergency Management System. It's a wealth of information and does provide a lot of those protocols that we should have in place for all of our students. So thank you for your question. Mike, did you want to?
So just to touch on your point specifically, there is as I'm sure you're aware, a multitude of different ranges as far as how much mobility restriction there can be, or even, like emotional ability to respond in a scenario like that. So one of the things that we've done when we get into doing school safety drills, or whatever the scenario may be, is making a point of either going directly to a classroom with an entire population of mobility issues and discussing what their best options might be. Maybe it's unimaginable they would evacuate in certain circumstances, but then discussing it through with them, maybe there are situations where it could be appropriate, and then discussing their room or their own environment, specifically how can they best work to harden, protect themselves should an event arise. And then one of the things that was mentioned earlier was student assistance teams that meet on a very regular basis, and that has actually been a conversation we've had at those about how do we work with students that maybe aren't at that severe of a level of mobility impairment, but there's maybe a social or emotional issue that could come up even just during the drills, and to have those students maybe be aware that there might be more of an issue there, something we can work to address ahead of time or even proactively sooner, and then certainly make sure that they get support services followed up with them after a drill so that we can recognize, was there something more that could have been done? Did they respond in a way that we didn't imagine, even better than we imagined? And kind of work to reevaluate those. So these drills, every time we do them, there's always a reflection and kind of a self-critique after, and that's always been a component of them, is how did it work for certain students with selected population issues.
I'm Chris Robbins. I live on 39 Parkerville Road, and I want to say it's in many ways it's regretful to have to be here, but it's also impressive to hear your thorough presentation of what you've done and the incredible research you've delved into to find out what the best protocols are for our children's safety. And I come as a grandparent. I've got one grandchild now in the public school system, other grandchildren in other systems, and I worry about them. And I guess the question I have is, when we look at what happened in Florida, government advised us at every level that our kids were safe and the protocols were in place. And yet at every level of government, from the police all the way up to the FBI, to the mental resource departments, didn't come through. And you did address some of the question. The answer to this question perhaps is to the level of training so that we can assure ourselves that people are held accountable. And I can't imagine being even the secretary who has to push the button to let somebody in and not know what to do if it looks like a threatening situation. So how do we get the right people in the right place and ensure that people are held accountable when the situation regretfully might occur?
Thank you. Chief Paulus?
Was talking about this somewhat before the meeting started, and one thing that I thought about, and we've had, since Florida, we've had several incidents that came through, which the town's doing their job, they're seeing something, they're saying something, and as far as doing something, I've been enormously impressed with in these situations which didn't pan out to be a threat, but how the two departments and the school department work with each other. These things are taken very seriously, and we can throw effort, manpower, and collaboration at the problem. So from the school administrators to the principals to the teachers to the counselors in the classroom who report it, both towns, our detectives work extremely well with each other. Our departments work extremely well with each other. We have other resources that we can go to, detective networks in the region, and I was just totally impressed with how they dissected the problem and they came to a conclusion very quickly to everybody's safety. And I think that's something that we do well. We're lucky to live in two towns where you can get that type of personalized service, not only from situations like this, but in all everyday situations. And we're also very lucky that we live in a state where the gun laws are reasonable, and they do give the power to the police chiefs to immediately suspend licenses and seize weapons until the situation can be investigated and maybe go through the court system. But as far as holding people accountable or people doing their job, I think in the towns that we live in and the state that we live in, we're very blessed. So I hope that answers your question.
Hi, my name is Elise. Quick question. Parents, in case of an event, what would be the best response from parents for you guys in doing your job and maintaining the safety within the location where the event occurs? So there's a lot of communication, kids are tweeting there's something happening in the school, so on and so forth, and let's say it's an actual event. What would be your suggestions, recommendations for parents' actions? A lot of parents may think going straight to the school and getting into it would be the way to do it, so on and so forth. Where would that information come to, and what would that look like?
Well, it's not going to come immediate because we're going to be preoccupied with the event. And my knee-jerk reaction to that is stay home. Do not come to the school. You're just going to compound matters. When you drive, specifically for this high school, you come up that long driveway off of Bartlett Street. add 50 or 60 parents' cars lined up, and I have emergency vehicles trying to respond to the school. The fire chief has rescue vehicles and ambulances trying to come into the school, and we've got parents trying to get to school. You know, I mean, we address that aspect in our plan, but, you know, there's a famous statement out there about battle plans only lasting until the first engagement with the enemy. So, you know, the plan is there so that we have an idea of what it is we're supposed to do, but, you know, we all have active social media platforms. And we do our best to put information out there, but our primary focus is on the response and mitigating the situation, not playing it out on social media. And what we really need to do is when we do put something out on social media, it has to be short, sweet, and factual, because we need to avoid speculation, because trust me, I've seen firsthand that can take on a life of its own just from what is the rumor control and rumor mill has to say about, you know, what you said, kids are tweeting, I heard this, I heard that, it gets picked up and it just gets totally blown out of proportion. So the answer from a public safety point of view, I know it's difficult you want to come there, your children are there, and we know the parents are going to respond. And it's, we'll deal with it the best we can, but you need to let us do our job. Go, Chief.
Yeah. One of the other things is we use a program called CodeRed. So I highly recommend, you guys use it in Southborough too? Yeah. That you register your phones on CodeRed. And that's something that both the chief and I have the ability to launch right from our phones. So we can say, you know, all parents for this facility report here. Or we could even have dispatch put it out. So that's an excellent tool. Other than social media, I do recommend you follow both our Twitter feeds and our Facebook and all that, but also CodeRed is an excellent tool. I would recommend strongly that you log in and register your phones for that. So we just need to go on? You can go to the town website, click on the CodeRed link, and it'll take you there and follow the directions.
Actually, I just want
to
follow on the chief. That's the official emergency notification system for the town of Northborough and for the town of Southborough is CodeRed. I mean, it was done jointly. The two towns did it to get a contract that was reasonable to do that. So, point well taken. That's why he's the emergency management director too. So,
and just so you know, we have a strict policy in Northborough. Southborough does the same thing. We don't use that to tell you that we're doing water flushing or we're doing this. If something comes across CodeRed, it is a real situation, and please pay attention to it. You're not going to get anything else across there but important information.
And I just want to add from a school perspective, if there was, or if there were to be a critical incident, our ability to communicate is really turned over to Command Center, and that often has everything to do with the emergency management activities within each community. I will say that on a regular basis, we practice tabletop emergency drills, and it's everyone all in at the table, and every scenario possible is presented, and together we continue to collaborate through and work through those emergency scenarios, which are pretty intense, and they're progressive. So when we think we have one emergency addressed, another one comes our way. So they're progressive emergencies, and we do go through those practices, and actually I think we had to reschedule one because of snow, and we've got one coming up. So everyone in the community is around the table trying to process this out together, and it speaks to, again, the practice and the drill that becomes first nature when an incident happens.
Good evening. I'm a parent. I have a freshman here at Algonquin. Also, I have a middle school at Chaudier. My question is, in case of the adverse event, what do you suggest if the students are running away and far from the school? She's a freshman. Can she get into the senior's car, and if any of her friends are driving, can she go home, or it's not allowed? All the gates will be locked.
sure, go ahead.
I think the question was, can the students drive off campus? Is that the question?
Yes.
No, the students are trained, they're not to go to their vehicles. If there was a mass exodus of cars trying to get out, one driveway, depending on which school it may be. Algonquin, we'll use it as an example. No one would be able to get in, emergency wouldn't be able to respond in, as well as students would not be able to drive out, making the matter much worse. They can travel much faster on foot, and all students are trained to go to a special rally point, and then a reunification point, but no one is to get in their cars and drive.
All right. How do you suggest, is it safe to be in the car park hiding, or it's not suggesting?
We want the kids to get away from the danger as far away as possible. We call it a danger zone, where we try to get them as far away so that rounds aren't going outside the school as well as inside. So we want to get them far away enough out of that danger zone as possible.
Thank you very much.
Hi. You mentioned reunification points. Are those points where parents would be sent to if the kids were sent away off campus? And if that is so, I assume you have one for each school. Is that something that would be communicated to the parents ahead of time so that it wouldn't have to be in the middle of all the chaos, just to reassure parents that if something were to happen next year, this is where your kids would be sent and this is where you would be picked up, rather than having everybody come to the school? Is that something you plan on, or is that just a case-by-case?
So if I could answer that for you, there are reunification points specific to each school in both towns. However, the plan is not to communicate those to parents ahead of time, simply because those are constantly being reevaluated and possibly changing based on our protocols and plans. And those are not things we want to communicate to either make confusion and or potentially set them up for a secondary attack. So what would happen is, in like a CodeRed communication, that would be one of the ways in which we would communicate to you where to go to get your children, because the school is not going to be the answer that day, because all the things the chief said about emergency personnel needing to get here, the same reason that why the kids aren't supposed to leave in their cars, is we need to get emergency personnel to the scene as swiftly as possible. And so having parents or students and other vehicles that don't need to be there moving just complicates that matter. So we will communicate where you can get your children as soon as we possibly can. Just know that until you do hear from that, the best thing you can do is at least to stay away from the school for the time being.
We also have to establish security at that reunification point. We're just not going to let children be released without having some sort of identification and who they're being released to. So.
My name's Jen Mack. I'm from Southborough. My questions are for the school administrators. I'm a psychologist and a researcher, so my questions come filtered through that piece of it. But so I have a two-part question. First of all, my question is, what happens, or what policies are in place to help those kids who are identified potentially as a behavioral risk or someone that you're keeping an eye on? What happens with that child through the school system? How are they helped and supported? And my second question is related to that. We actually know that only about 4% of violent acts are linked to a specific mental health disorder, and other predictors like being young, male, angry, substance use, those other factors are more linked to the actually committing a violent crime. So my question is, what do we do about those children who are not identified through the mental health services or guidance counseling? How do we tell parents, administrators, teachers to be able to identify potential risk factors in the moment in these contextually based issues? Thank you.
So just a point of clarification on the question. Are we talking about at times of critical events, or are we talking about enrolled in our schools as they progress through the grades?
I guess enrolled in the schools, I mean both, but again, if we know someone is potentially at a high risk for acting out or for being angry or they're having difficulty at home, what gets done to help support that student so it doesn't become a problem?
So I think that it's a complex problem, and it's a multi-pronged approach to addressing these issues. There isn't one particular answer to addressing all of the concerns that you you're referring to. But one of the things that we did talk often about in the presentation this evening, and we pride ourselves in making sure is present in all of our schools, is that important dialogue and the collaboration and the connections we make with the family, but also within the structures that exist at each grade level and within our schools. So within our schools, we have a structural support system that provides for continual and active monitoring of our students who've been or who present themselves with concerns, whether they're behavioral or academic concerns. And that's done through a variety of transitional, I'm going to use the word task force, but transitional programming supports in terms of student assistant teams at each grade level, but through the grades and transitioning from school to school to school. We spend a lot of time, certainly, as we pass our students along to another school, as in Southborough, and also in Northborough. Moving on to the high school or to the middle school, these are critical developmental points for students, which can also be somewhat adjustment periods for students and exacerbate any particular anxieties that they may have around a variety of issues. So we make sure that those conversations and the discussions about student-specific issues are continual, and there is a continuum of those conversations with students. And as needed, we have supports within our school system. So one of the things that we really have made a significant investment in all of our schools is our behavioral and emotional support staff. At each school, we have at least one school psychologist, at least a behavioral specialist, and within those structures, also support assistance teams depending on the needs of the student. So we know our students, and we do not assume that as they move from grades to grade, that knowledge about a student is just going to be realized. So we make sure that those conversations continue. We also do a lot of outreach to the partnerships that we enjoy with member organizations within our communities, and we continue to explore more ways to reach out to these groups. Just recently this year, we have the Northborough-Southborough Coalition that offers a variety of resources to our schools, and we try to access those. But within our school communities, we have the Family and Youth Partnership and our social service organizations, so that allows us to perhaps have that connectivity to the home. We also have some conversations that take place on a regular basis in terms of a student network support that allows us to have conversation with the courts depending on the needs and the situations as they present themselves. But as we all know, in dealing with these situations, there's never enough community-based supports for schools to continue to refer out to. So this is beyond just a school issue. It's one that's really, on a much larger scale, a community-wide concern that together we need to address, because those supports beyond the school setting are equally important for those students to continue to grow and develop. Thank you for your question.
Hello, my name is Sachin Shaw. First of all, a big thank you for all you do. I know it's a very, these are tough times, and I think you're really doing a great job. One specific question I have about school infrastructure is that do we have CCTV cameras in schools? Do we have any plans for that? Have you considered that? Because that's something that I've seen some other schools doing. So that was my question.
So one of the things that's important to us and was very validating as we went through this research-based process, and I would encourage you to download Deval Patrick's report. You'll find it very helpful and very informative, that it's a combination of effort, and as we said, it's a balanced system that we need to have in place. So the importance really lies with that behavioral supports, collaboration with the towns and safety officials, active engagement with our parent community, training drills, and infrastructure. And so throughout the past 6 years, we have continually upgraded our infrastructure. I was here when Columbine took place as a teacher, and the notion that we needed to lock our doors was we have to lock our doors to our schools. So from that point to where we are now, leaps and bounds ahead, and recognizing the unfortunate reality of what we need to do. So I believe that we continue to investigate suggestions that are made in terms of what would enhance our infrastructure, but we also know, and I think the police will certainly attest to this, that in those instances where there have been active shooters in some very tragic circumstances, has been levels of security, including metal detectors that have not addressed the situation. So yes, there's a preparedness piece and a preventative measures that we should be taking, and we have done so. I'll apologize for not being able to tell you exactly what we've done, because that's one of the things that is about safety and keeping us secure, but we continue to look for upgrades. We also have those conversations with our safety officials to make sure that if we need to be doing something specific, we're addressing those needs. And I think, did that answer the question? Okay.
I'm Chris Robbins, and during your presentation, what I thought was impressive, you addressed the word culture of our community and our schools. You talked about the values we're trying to reinforce in our schools between kids, faculty, and our parents. And the big thing is levels of collaboration that I don't think have ever been achieved the way they have with the department heads that are required to address this critical issue. But the key thing is, this all happened because perhaps maybe the values or the culture is not perhaps the standard we need when we hear about the opioid epidemic, when we hear about kids, and I'm getting this from my granddaughter. She's a junior at her school. Kids sexting to each other, dehumanizing women, the violence on the TV screen in the theaters. And this is hard to overcome. And basically, we dehumanize each other in ways that are just tragic. And so how do we reinforce a high moral culture, a standard of values, where we, so we don't become, in essence, enablers of this kind of acting out? How do we nip this in the bud and get back to the standards we hold so dear, and I think that you are so well versed in acting on and dealing with? So if you could deal with this issue of reinforcing the culture and the values, that would be helpful.
The ills of the societal norms from decade to decade, I think all of us here wish we had that one right answer. I can only speak for how we address these situations that might fall within one of many categories that you just identified in terms of concerns. Clearly, what is happening out there comes into our schools, but we can have expected and reinforced norms, starting with mutual respect. We can provide avenues, which we have done, for students who are not feeling that they are being respected, however that is defined, in terms of our policies and our practices. And I think policies are one thing, but what we practice on a day-to-day basis is more important than a policy. And so what do we communicate to students with respect to what is expected of them? Not just academically, because we do have high and rigorous academic standards, but we also equally have high expectations for mutual respect, for kindness, for those kinds of things that are not always as popular and not always found in the media on a day-to-day basis. We also have to realize that the media is not always, except for cable access, our friend in terms of the things that they emphasize and the message and the images that they communicate to our students each and every day. So it's important for us through our curriculum to make sure we have these kinds of conversations and that we have this active dialogue with our students and to empower them and to feel safe enough to have these difficult conversations and allow them to express their opinions within a respectable norm. I think our parent community share in this responsibility. They are with us for some period of time, and they are also with our parent community and our community at large some time. So we also share in this responsibility. It is a partnership. We struggle with social media. Social media isn't always very nice. And, we'd like to say to our students, put your phone down and look up. Let's have a conversation. And so we are all role models for those students, and collectively we can fight the good fight against, the images and what they see around them. So I think our practices, our policies, holding true to what our core values are. Core values are embedded in our mission statement. I encourage you to take a walk through our strategic plan. We live that document. It's not just something that's on paper. We practice that, and we refer to it, and we engage in conversations about it. And I think that goes a long way in sending a very strong message to our students that this is who we are and this is what we believe in. And I also want to say thank you to the parent community. The mere fact that you're here tonight, you are engaging in safe school practices because you're here, you want to learn more, you want to support the work that's going on, and you want to engage in the process. So you are active participants in our safe school readiness planning just by being involved. And I thank you for that.
I also would like to add that our educators are outstanding, and the most important role that we have in our district is that of classroom teacher. And our teachers do an excellent job of being role models and helping students to be critical thinkers, collaborators, communicators, and problem solvers. And we pride ourselves on the great teachers that we have in our classrooms in Northborough and Southborough.
Thanks again for a great presentation. I apologize, I was a few minutes late, so I don't know if you covered it in the beginning, but what's been the students' reaction when you go through the ALICE drills? I would guess they would be a range of this is boring to this is interesting to this is scary to why are we having this? And we'd just love to hear the points of view about what are the children saying, or young adults, what are they saying, and what are you offering up as a response to that?
So I'm going to turn this over to the SROs because they have been with us every step of the way in terms of initial planning for our drills, and then also being with us every time we have a drill at every school. We try to coordinate their time with our 10 schools, and they somehow are able to be there and to be present. So they're great witnesses to the process. And then I would suggest that that might be best answered by the building principals, who are actually with our students every time we drill. And also the part of the plan that we really didn't focus on was that we do scenario building with the students, so there's a lot of conversations, and there were a lot of conversations about what these practices were all about before we even sort of released them about the campus. So they've been progressive drill practices through every stage of implementation. And I will say that we had some drills the other day, and it's almost as if it's been part of their drill practice from day one because of the way we've rolled this out to them. But I want to turn that over to the experts, those who are actually with the students during the day.
If I could start to say that in Northborough, there are 13 different grade levels. So as far as what the reaction or response has been, that's varied partially just by age. The questions that we get asked can be very different. The first drill I remember running up here at the high school, the students were right on it, running out of the school involved. They weren't joking around about it too much or anything like that. Some of them really recognized the seriousness, and you could see some of the students even speaking to other students, like encouraging them, like, hey, come on, we got to go. Like, this is what we have to do during these drills. And then what I'll also say is that during the planning and implementation of these drills, there was a large amount of concern, I think, from the adults involved. Like, oh my God, how are our kids going to respond to us running drills where we talk about intruders and things like that in the school? And what we found out after the first round of drills was okay, maybe we might have overestimated how concerned the kids were, because we'd walk into a classroom and we'd be kind of talking around the word gun, and then they'd be like, oh, you're talking about a gun, right? Okay, so you're already using these words, you're already saying these things, and we get that, okay. So then we're working on kind of a crawl and walk and run sort of phase to rolling these drills out. We're well past the crawling stage, certainly, and we are really getting these things ramped up. And the kids are right there on board with us. I think most of the hesitation from it has come from the adults involved, and we're finding that the more we do these, the less that needs to be there. The students have been great about really being involved with that, and we've been very encouraging with them during it. And it's also one of those things we want to be asking for student feedback after these drills is, hey, how did this come across to you? Did you take it seriously? Was it a joke? And we really haven't found that to be in any kind of like large number of any kind of kids that weren't taking it too seriously. And we've also found that it prompted a lot of questions, especially at the K-8 level, a lot of questions in classrooms where we'd come in and speak with them. They were asking a lot of what-if scenarios, which I like to tell them, hey, that's great, that's awesome to ask what-if scenarios. And we could talk for weeks about all the different what-if scenarios, but if you're already thinking it through in your head and you're thinking it through with a logical approach, then you're problem solving that for yourself in a way that's probably going to work out well for you.
I feel the same way. I can attest that the students in Southborough take the drills very seriously, and we do a debriefing afterwards and get some feedback from the students. We're teaching them how to be safe, and I think they appreciate that fact that it's not a fool around type of thing. It's similar to a fire drill, which we're doing those drills to keep you safe. And I think the students have a buy-in to this program because we're ultimately trying to make sure that their life preservation and keeping them safe. So they actually have a pretty good approach to it, a good buy-in to the program, and they do take it seriously, and we certainly do appreciate that fact.
My first thought on this when I watched our first drill was, we're trying to overcome decades of walk, don't run, fire drills. No disrespect to my fellows in white up here, but think about your school days. The fire alarm rang, you get up quietly, you push your chair in so that nobody got stuck behind a desk. You walked to the door, you got in line, and you walked out, and the teacher took the attendance book. We're doing just the opposite. We're telling you, get out of Dodge and get out as fast as you can. Now, granted, as Mike said, it's done at different levels for the different age groups. So we go, the first few times we did it, it was low-key. As the years have progressed, now one of my thoughts was that every time there's been a fire drill, when you think about it, there's always a fire truck out front and there's firefighters in uniform. So when we do an ARHS drill, there's cruisers out front. And yes, the blue lights might be on. And now we've gotten to the phase, like when we're up here at the high school, when my guys are standing outside the door, they're wearing tactical gear and they're waving them out, come on, come on, come on, because they need to I want to add a sense of urgency to this drill, that it's not just get out and run and go outside. We're coming here for a reason. So we've kind of, I guess, spiced it up a little bit in that sense from our perspective. And it's also good on our perspective, from my guys' perspective, because we have a lot of new young officers that really aren't familiar with the layout of the school. So they have to come in. And when the kids, now when they go out, I'm going to have, our officers will come in so that they continue to get familiarized with the school. I expect them all to stop in at all the schools anyway during the day, and just for that reason. So that's where we're at with the Northborough drills. And I'm, when we do the next ones, I'm going to ask for some area police officials that are also ALICE instructors and some other chiefs to come on in and kind of observe, just for a fresh perspective on what we're doing and as a comparison to what they're doing and they do.
So let's hear from a elementary principal, a middle school, and the only high school principal. Sorry, Dr. Walsh.
So just from the elementary level, a lot of energy, a lot of development, a lot of insight has gone into how we unroll our program. We've had consulting psychologists to look at the developmental appropriateness of unrolling something like this and how it could be done. We use social stories for the younger kids. We use a script that's delivered in a consistent manner with all of our teachers. We have a week-long preparation when we take on one of these drills from start to finish in terms of unrolling. Why? To the point of emotional well-being of our students. Because we know, especially at the younger age, that kids get anxious about things that are unsafe. And our job is to reassure them that they will be safe in our care to the extent that's possible. They come in knowing that something has happened, that shootings have taken place in society. That's unfortunate. But we try to be as comforting and as realistic as possible that in our care, we have a plan. Our plan is to keep them safe, and these are the things that we can do to help them with that. And to the point of it being a life skill, we broaden our approach beyond the school. So if you're at a friend's house, or if you're in a cinema, or if you're in the shopping mall, these are skills that you can use to keep yourself safe within any environment. So it's a very thorough, methodical approach that we've taken. We've been using it for years. We're still using it. As was mentioned earlier, we're always refining it, and we're using our students' feedback to help move forward in a direction. And every situation is different. You know, it's not just the active shooter, it's threat-specific situations that could occur within society that we're trying to prepare for.
And I'll speak on behalf of my middle school principal colleague, Keith. At the middle school level, I think it's a little bit different because our students are developmentally maybe ready for a different sort of level of drill. I think that, to your point, certainly it is scary to think about for any of us, and for our kids it's scary because of the lack of control that we will all possibly feel in a situation. But I think it's also empowering for our students, and as they are getting older and getting more mature, they are away from adults more and more as the years go on. So when we start with them as sixth graders, certainly they still are somewhat like elementary students, but soon they begin attending sporting events without their parents, and concerts without their parents, and parties without their parents. So we talk to them about keeping themselves safe everywhere, that we will help them at school, and we will certainly guide them. But I believe that it's empowering for students to have some choices when they encounter a situation that is unsafe. And the what-if questions, there are so many what-if questions, and I think it can be unsettling for the adults to not have answers to the questions, because we cannot predict every situation. And it's okay for us to say that to students. And if anything were to happen at school, we're there with them, and we will help them make decisions. We know developmentally that it's possible that students will make a different decision than the adults around them will make at the middle school level. And we have to be okay with that. So for the adults, it is scarier at some level, because we are being disempowered while the kids are being more empowered. And so I think for students, as they get older, there is a reality for all of them that they will be without adults more than they will be with adults as they progress. So I believe that we are preparing them for more than just school, and so there's a sense of freedom. I think that, oh good, we're not gonna just sit under a desk and wait if something's gonna happen. We have some choices. So I think it is scary for all of us, but I also believe that it's empowering, and that's what we see at the middle school level.
And Dr. Walsh?
Thank you. So I have the opportunity to be at Algonquin. It's very exciting. We do build on the work that we just recently heard from Clayton and Michelle. What we do at the high school is we have that opportunity to continue to refine those critical and analytical thinking skills. We will never know all of the what-ifs, and what we want to do is continue the empowerment. And when we run the drills, the very reflective drills, we push our educators through daily, ongoing professional development about those connections. Because our high schoolers are young adults. They are going off into the world. And we want to make sure that they have that strong community support in the high school, that should they see something, they say something, and they have that person to say something to. So right from the beginning of the year, we do very intense ongoing professional development to make those connections, so that when you come across those uncomfortable situations and that student feels uncomfortable, they have that adult to have that strong connection to feel supported. And then when we practice the ARHS drills that builds on the fundamentals that occurred in elementary and in middle, we have that vertical alignment that seamless situation and how students are trained to react, so they get that common language that you heard Ms. Donato speak to, so that they know how to react. I think that answered any of the questions or concerns for high schoolers. One thing that we have the awesome opportunity to build upon is, and I think Detective Bissett spoke to this, is that after the drills, we immediately leverage the voice of our high schoolers. We pull them in and we say, how could we have done better? What could we have done more proactively to prepare you socially and emotionally for these very real concerning events? And you guys have seen Algonquin respond to some of those events very proactively, very positively, and unified, and that's just a true testament to the community support, the school support, and the connections that we have. Thank you.
I just want to add, you touched upon really what was the most extensive part of our training, and that was changing behaviors of the adults who since 1955 have been trained to duck and cover when we were worried about air raids. And my goodness, the threats have certainly changed since that time. And through the analysis of the footage of Newtown, which is elementary, Columbine, which was high school, Virginia Tech, which was college, the reaction of the students captured on tape was, why aren't we getting out? So for the students, it was less of a change and more instinctive than I think it was for the adults, because we were retraining the adults. We learned to hide under our desks, as we said earlier. And that process was about a year and a half of just taking our teachers through very powerful active intruder drills and making sure that they were comfortable with letting students make decisions, which is very difficult for our educators because they are the classroom teachers and they're used to making decisions on behalf of the students. So it was a very transference of power process that we took very methodically and made sure that our educators, who always rise to the occasion, were ready to launch these drills and bring a comfortable feeling to the classroom with our students. It was a wonderful experience and definitely a growth experience for all of us.
So how often are these drills, this ALICE drill, how often are they throughout the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school? How frequently do they have these?
So we set a district timeline, a priority, a scheduling through our planning process of at least 2 to 4 times a year, depending on, we had some drills scheduled and it snowed. And then we had some rescheduling and it snowed. And then it snowed again. And so we've had to reschedule a couple of them. And we feel very important, or what is an important component is having our officer team with us and making sure that our enhanced drill practices are supported by the time necessary to allow for processing and review. So we've set a schedule of 2 to 4 a year, which is a pretty healthy drill practice procedure. I will share, we have been sort of, I guess, level 3 drills at the lower, the elementary level and the middle school with probably a level 5 or 6 at the high school. And we have been looking at our drill and practices for several years now. And there will be a progressive increase in terms of the drill practices that we are engaging in at the elementary level. We've been doing a lot of case scenarios. We've been doing a lot of pre-notification of the drill practices. But at some point, and we've been having this conversation for quite some time, we will be moving those progressive drills on to sort of more active intruder experiences at the elementary levels. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So we're looking at practicing them 4 times a year. It is an intense process. The schedule does not always allow for perfect timing. We definitely don't want to have a drill during MCAS, and we know that MCAS consumes a fair amount of time in March and April and May. So that's our goal.
Any other questions? In the back.
But just ask the chiefs, we have fire drills 4 times a year.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you for all your services. My kids have done extremely well in the Northborough school system, and I appreciate everybody. I will say that I'm slightly disappointed because I was here for the first readiness meeting, and years ago, and I'm here today, and I don't feel like I'm hearing, like I wanted to hear changes to do with the school, the buildings, maybe a little bit different with the protocol. I've seen things online where people have a red line in their room. The kids stand back so a shooter can't see you looking into the door. Unfortunately, our times have changed. Since Sandy Hook, it keeps continuing, and I would love to advocate for finances. I don't know what I can do as an individual in the community, but I am a voice, and I'm willing, and I don't know, but it seems to me that most people in the community feel that we're extremely safe and these things won't happen here, and unfortunately, they happen everywhere. And I also commend you for having the protocol in place. I've paid attention to comments of Parkland and whatnot, and these students, they were trained to some degree, they're sitting on the floor, they've written out word for word how they feel. No one in this room, unless you've been in this scenario, can speak of how you would react. You can train till you're blue in your face, but you really don't know, which as a parent scares me. So I know I had a lot to say, but I really don't know what to ask or how to advocate.
So I appreciate your comments. We certainly do listen to our parent community. We had a presentation at Finn and Woodward last week. Some great suggestions were made, and we are already taking sort of some action on some of those steps. I was present at that readiness launch. I think I was standing up there at the time. And in terms of what we've done with our drill practices and how they've progressed through the years, from beginning with our teachers to now actually bringing them to the students in the classroom, and also some of the infrastructure upgrades that we've made, the conversations that we've had, the accessing of resources that provide some additional supports for our students, not always transparent to the parent community, but in fact we have made, I think, great progress over the last 5 years. I would love to hear more from you. This is not always the forum for those in-depth conversations to take place, but certainly would encourage you to contact the building principal or to contact my office so we can continue the dialogue.
Hi, I guess my question is jumping from there. As each of these sad situations happen, tragic situations happen, it is time to reflect on what we have in place. And this was a very good demonstration of what is here. But as I'm sure all of you have had time to reflect and say, what are next steps here? In our community, what do we still need to do? Are we where we need to be? It certainly was an impressive presentation, but you all being the experts, are there holes? Where are they? Is there more to do?
So I'm glad you asked that question. I mentioned that in 2013 we sort of had benchmark assessment of all the schools and all of our safety practices in the drill in the district. We feel, and we have evidence that we have made some significant gains, but much like you, we're always looking to continue to improve, to identify areas that we can continue to grow and enhance. And so we have a new assessment that we're launching just to determine where have we come from where we were to where we need to go in certain areas. And so that is a document that we're going to implement from the United States Department of Commerce. It's a crime and safety assessment. And so we'll be administering that to all of our administrators very shortly, and that will provide us some additional information. We obviously have a plan that we'd like to actualize, but at this point in conversations with our safety officials, which are ongoing, we meet probably monthly, to review our practices. One of the areas that we continue to be concerned with, not because of necessarily threat assessments or specific to our ALIS drills, but how can we always continue to provide additional supports for our students? And first and foremost, that's our concern. While they're not always tied to safety, they are concerned and tied to our students achieving their personal best. And so we continue to look at programming options for our students. We continue to look at support services for our students, because again, that's having kids be successful in the school environment. We are expanding, I think I can announce this. We are expanding the DARE program, which is all about making connections with students into our middle schools. This is something that we've been hoping to do for years, and through some great participation with both the Chief of Police and the department in Northborough and also in Southborough, we'll be introducing that into the middle schools. So that's something that we've been talking about, and we're going to move forward with that. We are also establishing a safety anonymous tip line. We do have a bullying hotline that is available through our website. So I think you asked a great question, what can parents do? And you asked after an incident occurs, but certainly if parents have information that we should know so that we can do good work in our schools. So you saw something, you say something, we need to do something with that information, and we do. Make sure that that is reported to us directly to the building principal, but we're also now providing an anonymous tip line. We're in the process of setting that up. We did realize that there are only 36% of the schools in the country that have these tip lines, so we look at all of these suggestions that are out there, and we try to really assess what we can readily implement in the schools. Did that answer your question at all? Thank you.
So I'm just wondering if you guys ever thought of, because I know it costs a lot, these intruder door stoppers. I know you have a lot of doors in every school, but I see them online all the time.
We have, and I will just, I guess it's the unfortunate reality of the world we live in. About 15 minutes after the tragedy in Florida was announced, my email was, my inbox was flooded with new products that we should look at. And since we've started the ALIS protocols, there have been so many discussions about what is the best intruder device to use. And we've analyzed and we've assessed many of those products. And I think it was a conversation that we had, I'm not sure who we had that with just recently, that there's nothing better than a locked door. Research has indicated that when an intruder enters the building, they have one purpose, and that is to reach as many kids as possible. And any deterrent, like a locked door, suggests that they will move on to the next, and that's their progression. So we've put our emphasis on making sure that all of our doors are locked, because we know that is a strong deterrent. Research has told us that. All of our teachers maintain the doors in a locked position so that if there's an announcement made, they can quickly close the door. And just today, there was another opinion on what we should use in addition to the locked doors. So it's something we keep looking at, but it's hard to center on one. So what we've centered on is what is the proven practice and recommended to us as the best deterrent in a situation like that, and right now it's the locked doors.
One of the other things we run into, in the State Fire Marshal's office just put out a notice today to us, because saying now that this, since Parkland happened, people are worried, it has to be an approved device, because they still have to be able to evacuate the school if there's a fire. So how do we make those all work together? And it's, fire department's bad guys because we're saying everyone has to be able to get out, and we want to be able to lock down because of active shooters. So how do we make that work together? So we're working on that. The marshal's office is looking for approved devices that we can use, and as soon as he has a list of that, he'll send them out to us, and we'll be able to communicate that.
If I could touch base a little bit further on that as well, where there might not be a specific device in each room where you want to slip a thing into a door, there are a multitude of very heavy objects in there, and that's part of the ALICE training, that enhanced lockdown as far as barricade. It's not just shut the door and go behind a line, an imaginary line on the floor. It's take the objects you have available to you, put them up in front of the door, behind the door, obscure vision through the door. Because while that door is already locked and it's locked into a metal frame, even then, should it happen to get open, you have hundreds of pounds of things behind it if it's properly barricaded after that. So that's part of it. But again, part of our goal with the ALICE protocol is that most, if not all, of the occupants of a school or an area would be able to evacuate because of the information they receive as far as where a threat is. So the majority of persons would presumably be outside of the building, but those that may stay because of their scenario have a lot of opportunities available inside of the room they're already in that's currently existing there that they can use to help better secure that door.
We'll take 2 more questions.
Hi, my name is Anand. Sorry if it's a silly question, but let's say in non-school hours, if a school staff or a student is involved in an illegal, dangerous activity, is it communicated to the school management? Is there a communication between police department and school? I'm not aware of. So is there a need or?
Yes.
No?
The communication's very open between our department as well as the school to make sure that any kind of safety-related information is readily communicated. Part of my role and Officer Landry's role is that open communication, that sharing of important information so that no one's kept in the dark about something that could have protected someone.
So one last question, and then we'll hear closing remarks. You've been very persistent. You've had your hand up the whole time.
Hi, my name is Nancy. Can you walk us through, you've talked about scenarios where the intruder gets into the building, and I'm interested to understand what happens when there are multiple perpetrators and the person enters the building and hits the fire alarm. The law requires the population to exit the building, which is a clear access to the student population for a shooter to go at the population. What's in place to protect the students in that scenario, which is definitely on the news media right now?
I think when we talk about scenarios, there's a multitude of them, and we try to best practice statistically. Statistically, have shooters pulled the fire alarms? Yes, they have. But what we're trying to do is, if the danger is a shooter and the fire alarm is going off, we're not going to follow the fire alarm protocol, meaning get in that line, walk we're going to follow the ALICE protocol. You're running outside of the building, in any egress possible. So we're changing that mindset that if they hear a fire alarm and some shooting, think of the shooting, not the fire alarm going off. So we're trying to, just change that practice so that the danger's inside, we need you to get outside.
And to touch base a little bit further on that, part of the ALICE protocol is the sharing of information, and to make sure that if the situation changes, that it gets communicated in a way. So it may happen that the fire alarm gets pulled and you don't know that we might suddenly be walking into an ALICE situation, that it becomes one. And then that needs to get alerted, and people need to become aware of the fact that it is. And then the students are being trained to adapt to new information as they're receiving it. So in the same way that, let's say there's a scenario where someone elects to lock down and barricade themselves in a room because of where the intruder may be, they then may receive information later that would then suggest they could safely leave the building. So the more information that individuals get in those scenarios, the better decision that they can make. We are not going to be able to just hand them, if this happens, do this, just kind of checklist to go through. It's take the information you're receiving and make an educated and informed decision based on the information you've received and the training that you've been going through up to this point.
I do want to add a change of fire drill practice, which I think also might address your question. For the past year, we've been blocking exits as part of the fire drill procedure. And we all remember our fire drill. It was predictable. We were to exit out the corridor, the clipboard came out, we waited, we raised our hand, they went back into the school. And interestingly enough, in one particular school, two particular schools, when the exits were blocked and the students had to make decisions, they were out of the building faster than when we followed the natural protocols that we're all accustomed to. And we attributed that to the decision-making process that the students are going through the ARHS protocol and drill procedures. So in collaboration and cooperation with the fire chiefs, which is a very much change of practice and mindset, that's going to become the norm in all of our schools, and that's a natural support to our ARHS protocols, because students are making split-second decisions that will save their lives when they're exiting our building, whether it's a fire or whether it's an active shooter.
So at this time, I'd like to offer our panelists with closing remarks.
Okay. Well, I'll go first then, I guess. First, I want to compliment you all for coming here, because obviously it shows you have an interest in it, and as usual, you're probably the parents that don't need to be here. I just need to say that since I've been chief over the last 2 years, Mike's not the only Algonquin graduate here. I made good on my escape here in 1977, but just can't keep away from the place. But worked with Christine when I was the school resource officer that Michael had back from 1988 to 1996. And we've had a very good relationship, the police department and the school department, especially up here at the high school. Mike's full-time job is the schools. He's here, he's got an office in the building. But he does leave to go visit the other schools just to make sure that there aren't any other school issues. I'm probably on the phone 2 or 3 times a week with Christine, and I think I actually got an email from her one morning at like 4:11 a.m. and I asked her if she was crazy. But
the answer was no, of course. The collaboration and the cooperation is incredible, and even more so nowadays, it's with the fire department. I don't think 2 or 3 years ago you'd have seen the fire department at a meeting like this with us. And that's a testament to the switch in thinking when it comes to this sort of training, because this isn't just a police scenario, police response. As a matter of fact, I don't want to steal any thunder from Chief Paulus as well, but we received a significant grant through the Central Region Homeland Security Council with Southborough and Westborough for the 3 departments to undergo some significant active shooter training, specifically geared towards schools. And in addition to that, we also included in that training, which is a first for me in almost 40 years now in the police service, we're doing it with the Northborough, Southborough, and Westborough fire departments, because this is not just a police response anymore. If you see on TV, the fire department medics, they're coming in with us anymore. It used to be they'd stay outside until we told them it was safe, but if you've got injured people inside a building, we can't do that anymore. So we secure areas, they come in with us. So that training will be taking place within the next month as far as that goes for the 3 towns. And those are our 3 primary mutual aid towns as well. As far as, if something happens at one of the schools, those will be the immediate responding agencies that back us up along, Marlboro and the State Police. When something happens in a school building like that and the call goes out for help, like I said, we really can't have parents blocking the driveways, because there'll be people coming from all over the place. That's, the statewide mutual aid plan would kick into effect for law enforcement and for fire service, for mass casualty, whatever it may be, unfortunately. But the response would be immense. But we're collaborating on the police and fire side of that. We're actually even going to be custom tailoring our response policies to include the fire department in our response into the building at some point in time. So it's constantly evolving. Again, the information sharing that Detective Bissett referenced earlier, there are statutory requirements on the police department. We have to notify the school department of certain things if we arrest a student at a school for a felony, or if there's a incident involving a threat to commit harm, or if there's a weapons offense. We would do that anyway, but there's a statutory requirement for us to do that. The flow of information from the police, by the way, to the school is very unrestricted. There's no regulations saying what we can't share with the schools.
So conversely, the schools are more restricted on what they can share with us, obviously for students' privacy issues. But as far as what happens out in the street, what information that we might get that might constitute a threat, or intelligence information that we may have that is key to something that might be a situation in the school setting, Mike shares that on a daily basis. We keep no secrets from the school department. Other than that, our primary mission here is to keep everybody safe, everybody at this table. It's our primary function, and that's what we do. We'll do the best that we can. One parent asked me one day, I thought it was kind of an unfair question, what can I do to assure their child's safety? What can you do to assure me that your child's going to get home with you tonight safely? I mean, I don't want to use statistics in a crowd like this, but it's more likely that a child will be injured coming to school in a school bus accident than in a shooting situation, to keep things in perspective. When you look at the numbers in the situation, it does happen. It's unfortunate. It makes headlines, but it's when you look at the numbers of public school students and the number of schools in the country, it's not as epidemic as it's portrayed in the media. Reasonable steps are being taken and to keep the schools safe. And I think more to like what Christine has alluded to, an open and nurturing environment. So, thank you.
And just to follow up on what Chief Liver said, to help facilitate that, we're actually equipping our departments, myself, Chief Murrow, and Chief Purcell, with ballistic vests and helmets and goggles. So our paramedics can follow in and be protected and get those people right out. It used to be that we stood outside and waited, like Chief Liver said. We don't do that anymore. We come in, we take care of whoever needs to be taken care of, and moves out. So I've been doing this for 40 years now, and I can tell you the cooperation amongst these departments is outstanding. There's no secrets, just working together. Working with the school department has been terrific. So we're doing everything we can to take care of your children. And I want to reiterate, I'm thrilled that you're here. I wish there were more.
I don't know if I can add anything more than what they've said, but I know from the fire side, we've been involved with the schools for a long time. We do fire drills 4 times a year, and we've been doing that for quite a few years. And that was done mostly because there's been a lot of tragic fires and loss of life in school buildings, and now this is just a different thing that's come along. And it's a change for us as well, because again, like we've talked about, we're used to pulling the fire alarm, evacuating orderly, and looking at that. We've also been in the schools teaching fire safety, stop, drop, and roll, crawl low under smoke, and I'm sure a lot of you people have been aware of that. And this, again, is very new for us. And it's completely different for police and fire to be able to get together and really work out a situation like this. And hopefully we never have to use this. And part of our training, part of our preparation is to make sure that if it does happen, that we are prepared, hoping that it will never happen. But we have to be prepared for that. We have to train for these events that, although they, in the news, are very sensational and can be very devastating, that they're low incidence of happening, but again, we have to be prepared to train for that. So this is part of what we do, and again, it's very new for all of us as well. So as much information as we can give you, we will. I know there's a lot that we can't because it's protected and we don't want to give out too much information, but just to assure there are plans out there, there are things in the work, and we are training to make sure that your students are safe.
I would also echo what some of the other chiefs have touched on. Certainly when we see those images on TV, the anxiety level rises. You see those kids running from the school. I've been to seminars over the last 4 or 5 years that estimated that on any given day, a student in a school has about a 1 in 600,000 or 700,000 chance of being the victim of a school shooting. When we had these discussions over the last couple of weeks, it didn't take me long to look at an internet search, and a Washington Post article quoted that there are roughly 50 million children that attend school on a 180-day schedule. So there's about a 1 in 614,000 chance on any given day that they'll be the victim of a school shooting. If I could think of an acronym, Certainly, it's an occupational hazard for the police to be involved in shootings. There are about 1 million police officers in this country. Roughly, they've gotten it down to a number that about 60 die as the result of gunfire, give or take on any given year. I think you'd say that those numbers are low, but you have officers that wear body armor, that call for backup on their car stops, that run the person's criminal history before they even get out of the car, that approach stops a certain way for their safety. I believe I mentioned that wait for backup. So I think it's the same in a school setting where we're trying to take all of those things that we need to do for prevention and apply them every day as just a part of our normal way that we do business. And I think that you can rest assured that the school officials and that your public safety officials are taking every step and investigating every safety avenue, whether it's locks on doors, cameras, procedures, training, to make sure that we don't end up on the news. So I think a police officer really couldn't do the job for any time long term if we had those anxieties going home every night. And I think it's the same thing here. We prepare, and if something tragically does happen, we're able to respond to it.
I'll be brief. Thanks for coming. Have a good night.
If I could just say that our main goal would be that an incident like this doesn't happen. And one of the ways we do that is through ongoing and open dialogue, communication, and awareness, both as departments, but also as a community, and that there's a sharing of information, that if you see something, please say something and trust that we will do something about it. I've been a police officer a little over 5 years. I've been in multiple situations where it was dangerous, frightening, and my life was in jeopardy. And I've done that with members of my department, the Southborough Police Department, and neighboring police departments, and I can tell you with a strong amount of certainty that we're going to do our job if something does come up.
Again, echoing the comments that have been shared throughout the evening, your presence here tonight, extremely important. Please come again whenever we have an open forum of any type. This is a strong message that you send your students, that you are in there with them as their educational experience continues throughout the years. I think I want to echo Detective Bissett's comment that we share with our students: if you see something, say something. And please know we do something. We are not always able to respond as quickly as the next social media post, because we're doing the work that needs to be done to make sure that students are safe. And at a certain point in time, when we have the facts and we can communicate those to you, we will, because communication is a key piece of our core values, our strategic plan. So please know that we take your concerns and the information that you share with us seriously. Safety of our students and our school campuses are of our highest priority. And I think the presence of our administrative team here tonight shows their full commitment and support of our core values around safety. They've had tremendously long days, and they lead our staff and our students each and every day in the right direction. Without their leadership at the building level, without the commitment of our staff, of our teachers, we would not be able to institute these policies. And it is a full all-in from everyone in our school community. And again, highest priority. I would ask that if you have some suggestions, if you have some thoughts, I would prefer that you call or even come in. We have a Keurig, you can have coffee with us and chat. We are interested in what you have to say, and please reach out and have a conversation with us. It's very important, and it helps guide our work. So thank you for being here. And again, to all our administrators and to our teachers who are not here but are here in spirit every day, thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to work with this team. The challenges that they have and the time that they've taken to be here tonight also does speak to the same high level of priority that they have with respect to supporting our schools and our students. So thank you for your full-out commitment throughout this whole process, not just this evening, but each and every day, and your service. Thank you.